Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Amid the dusty pages of Israel's history, between wars, divine promises, and forgotten exiles, rests a truth nearly erased by the passage of time, the story of Dan, the forgotten son of Jacob. Although he was the founder of one of the most populous tribes of ancient Israel, second only to the mighty tribe of Judah, Dan gradually faded from popular memory and historical records, as if an invisible hand worked to wipe out his legacy. Why did this happen? What could there be in Dan's story that so many would prefer to leave buried? While scholars and theologians delve into the glories of Levi, the deeds of Judah, or the mysteries surrounding Manasseh and Ephraim, few dare to uncover the buried secrets of Dan's lineage. But today, in this video, we dare. We will tear through the veil of forgetfulness and step into the dark and fascinating heart of Dan's story. Who was this man? Where did he come from? And more importantly, what was the true role of the tribe of Dan on the grand chessboard of Israel and humanity? Prepare yourself. What we are about to reveal may forever change your understanding of the history of the 12 tribes and of the secrets they hide. The true story and origin of Dan, the forgotten tribe of Israel. According to the book of Genesis, Dan was the first of 2 sons Jacob had with Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, making him Jacob's 5th son overall. Bilhah, of Aramean origin, thus a Syrian woman, became one of Jacob's concubines, as recorded in Genesis 33-3-6 and again in Genesis 35-22. Desperate to bear children, Rachel said to Jacob, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go into her, so that through her I too may have children." Jacob accepted, and Bilhah conceived and bore a son. Rachel named him Dan, proclaiming, "God has judged me, he has heard my voice and given me a son." The name Dan, derived from the Aramaic word Dan, means judge or judgment. Dan became the patriarch of the tribe of Dan, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Yet the history of his lineage is marked by curious and sometimes dark nuances. In the book of Judges, the tribe of Dan is portrayed as adopting heterodox religious practices, including the use of idols and teraphim, a clear sign of religious syncretism and a departure from the pure monotheism that was meant to define Israel. It is also from this tribe that the legendary figure Samson arises, renowned for his superhuman strength and extraordinary deeds. However, Samson's life is also filled with flaws, for he failed to fully uphold the Nazirite vows, embodying the delicate balance between divine calling and human weakness. Classical rabbinic writers often characterize Dan as the black sheep among the tribes of Israel. This perception is reinforced by passages such as those found in the book of Jeremiah, where the northern regions of Canaan, where Dan's tribe settled, are associated with darkness and wickedness, leading many commentators to view Dan as a symbol of corruption and apostasy. In rabbinic traditions and apocryphal texts, Dan's figure becomes even darker. He is frequently described as harboring hatred for Joseph and allegedly being one of the chief instigators behind the plot to deceive Jacob, staining Joseph's coat with goat's blood to fake his death. In the apocryphal prayer of Asenath, Dan is depicted conspiring alongside the Egyptian heir against Joseph, further cementing his image of treachery and disloyalty. Jacob's blessing upon Dan, recorded in Genesis 49:17, is equally intriguing. Dan shall be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. This serpent metaphor has been widely interpreted as a symbolic association with dark forces, even linking Dan in later traditions to figures such as Bel, a pagan deity associated with evil. This perspective is deepened in the apocryphal testament of Dan, where Dan, on his deathbed, warns his descendants against practicing envy and deceit, confessing his own struggles with these vices and warning of their grave spiritual consequences. Thus, Dan emerges in scripture and extra-biblical traditions as a complex and deeply ambiguous figure. Far from being just another son of Jacob, his story weaves through themes of judgment, betrayal, and spiritual downfall, elements that grant the tribe of Dan one of the darkest and most intriguing narratives among the 12 tribes of Israel. Early Christian writers such as Irenaeus of Lyon and Hippolytus of Rome were among the first to speculate that the Antichrist might arise from the tribe of Dan. This theory gained traction, especially due to one particularly striking detail: the absence of Dan from the list of the 12 tribes of Israel mentioned by the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, when he describes the 144,000 Israelites sealed for final salvation. Curiously, in Dan's place, the tribe of Joseph appears twice, represented both by Joseph himself and his son Manasseh, a duplication that many interpreted as a subtle indication that something was profoundly wrong with Dan's lineage. This omission does not seem accidental. For many, it carries a dark significance, suggesting a spiritual rupture or an association with evil. Turning back to the book of Genesis, chapter 49, we find Jacob on his deathbed, gathering his sons to bless them and prophesy their tribe's future destinies. When it comes time to address Dan, Jacob speaks words that are at once a blessing and a tense, enigmatic warning. Dan will judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. Genesis 49:16-17. This metaphor of the serpent, a symbol historically associated with cunning, betrayal, and danger, casts a long shadow over Dan's legacy, hinting at a destiny entwined with deception and disorder. This sense of unease grows even stronger when, immediately after blessing Dan, Jacob suddenly interrupts his prophecies and exclaims, "I await your salvation, O Lord." Genesis 49:18. This abrupt prayer, so unusual in the flow of blessings, seems to reveal Jacob's deep anxiety about what he foresaw in Dan's future, as if divine intervention would be necessary to prevent disaster from springing forth from this tribe. The biblical tradition informs us that, initially, the tribe of Dan settled in the hill country bordering Judah and the Philistines. However, unable to hold their inheritance under the relentless pressure of the Philistines, formidable and merciless enemies, the tribe eventually migrated northward in search of a new homeland. They violently conquered the city of Laish, renamed it Dan, and settled at the foot of Mount Hermon, at the northernmost edge of the Promised Land. This geographic displacement to the extreme north, a region frequently associated with pagan peoples and idolatrous practices, further reinforced the perception that Dan had strayed more radically than any other tribe from the ways of the Lord. It is within this setting of displacement, syncretism, and spiritual isolation that the enigmatic, and for some, sinister, reputation of the tribe of Dan was forged, a lineage that across the centuries would inspire fear, mystery, and apocalyptic speculation. Among the most notable members of the tribe of Dan stands Samson, a legendary figure whose story has echoed across the ages. Endowed with supernatural strength, granted directly by God, Samson became a true hero for his people, remembered for extraordinary feats that defy human comprehension. In the book of Numbers, the tribe of Dan is listed as the second largest among the tribes of Israel, surpassed only by the powerful tribe of Judah. However, some modern scholars point out that the census recorded in this book may reflect a perspective shaped by the so-called priestly source, a literary tradition dating to the 6th century BCE, which, they argue, could carry the biases and ideological viewpoints of its compilers. In the blessing of Moses, found in the book of Deuteronomy, and considered by many scholars to predate the Deuteronomistic redaction, Dan is mentioned in an enigmatic way. Dan is a lion's cub that leaps from Bashan. Deuteronomy 33:22. This prophecy, however, raises intriguing questions. Historically, the tribe of Dan did not inhabit the region of Bashan, located east of the Jordan River, suggesting that the text may preserve remnants of ancient traditions, lost territorial realities, or even symbolic interpretations that have faded over time. This obscure reference has sparked, and continues to spark, intense debates among scholars seeking to understand its true meaning and context. Moreover, the story of Dan's migration reveals the complexity behind the formation of Israel as a nation. Unable to hold on to their originally allotted territory, pressed by relentless enemies like the Philistines, the Danites abandoned their southern lands and embarked on a violent campaign to conquer the city of Laish in the far north, which they renamed Dan. This journey and its conflicts reflect not only the instability of the era, but also the dynamic nature of the Israelite tribes, constantly adapting to internal and external pressures. Moving forward in the biblical narrative, after the conquest of the Promised Land, the famous land flowing with milk and honey, around 1200 BCE, Joshua led the division of the territories among the 12 tribes of Israel. Significantly, the tribe of Dan was the last to receive its inheritance, which some interpret as a sign of their marginalized position among the tribes, or, according to certain scholars, as evidence of their difficulties in securing dominance in a region already contested by powerful neighbors. The journey of the tribe of Dan, from its origins to its migration, through its internal struggles and relations with other peoples, stands as one of the most complex and rich histories in the biblical record, laden with enigmas, moments of glory, and episodes of downfall. Originally, the territory destined for the tribe of Dan was a small enclave in the central coastal region of Canaan, strategically located between the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim, and the fierce Philistines to the west. To the north, their lands bordered Joppa, known today as the modern city of Jaffa on Israel's Mediterranean coast. However, this relatively modest territory was quickly pressured and reduced by the rising strength of the Philistines, one of the most warlike and hostile peoples of the time. Faced with constant threats, the tribe of Dan managed to establish itself only in parts of the mountainous regions overlooking the Sorek Valley. There they founded what came to be known as the Camp of Dan, an outpost in the rugged interior lands. This area to the south extended into the Shephelah, a strip of low hills between the mountains of Hebron and the coastal plains of Philistia, within the traditional domain of Judah. Over time, although initially modest, these lands became associated with the tribe's memory, known as the region of Dan. During the long period from the conquest of the Promised Land under Joshua until the establishment of Israel's united monarchy around 1050 BCE, the tribe of Dan, like the other Israelite tribes, belonged to a loosely connected tribal confederation without a centralized government. In times of crisis, when national survival was at stake, charismatic leaders known as judges would arise to unify and lead the people. Among all the judges, the most famous Danite was Samson, a towering figure who embodied both the strengths and weaknesses of his people. Endowed with supernatural strength, Samson stood out as an unlikely champion against the Philistines, though his life was also marked by impulsive choices and personal tragedies. As conflicts with the Philistines escalated, a portion of the tribe of Dan abandoned hope of establishing firm roots in the central coastal region. With determination, they migrated northward, crossing hostile territories until they reached the remote city of Laish. As recorded in the Book of Judges, chapter 18, the Danites violently conquered the city, destroyed its inhabitants, and rebuilt it under a new name, Dan, securing their presence at the extreme northern edge of the land of Israel. Thus, the new territory of the tribe of Dan was established northeast of Naphtali, near the eastern sources of the Jordan River, in the foothills of Mount Hermon. This new settlement not only redefined the tribe's geography, but also set a lasting mark. Dan became, in Scripture, synonymous with the northern boundary of Israel, as seen in the classic expression, "from Dan to Beersheba," denoting the full extent of the Israelite land from north to south. As the Philistine threat grew and hostile incursions against the Israelite tribes intensified, the need for stronger, centralized leadership became evident. In response to this critical situation, the tribes decided to establish a monarchy, capable of uniting the scattered clans and facing their common enemies. The tribe of Dan, as part of this movement, integrated into the new kingdom of Israel under the leadership of Saul, the first anointed king, who managed, albeit tenuously, to consolidate tribal unity. After Saul's death in battle, Israel's political situation became unstable. Initially, all the tribes except Judah remained loyal to Saul's house, supporting Ishbosheth, the king's son and successor. However, with Ishbosheth's assassination, the northern power structure collapsed. At that decisive moment, the tribe of Dan, alongside the other northern tribes, transferred their allegiance to David, then king of Judah, contributing to the reunification of the kingdom of Israel under his rule. Dan's support was significant. They provided a military contingent of 28,600 soldiers, renowned for their prowess in battle. This considerable force was crucial in helping David consolidate his dominion over all Israel, at a time when external threats and internal rivalries could easily have shattered the fragile unity of the young kingdom. However, the stability thus achieved would not endure forever. With David's death and the rise of his grandson Rehoboam around 930 BCE, a new schism occurred. The northern tribes, resentful of the heavy taxation and administrative abuses, broke away from the Davidic dynasty and founded the Kingdom of Israel, also known as the Northern Kingdom. The tribe of Dan, aligned geographically and politically with the north, became part of this new kingdom. During the Assyrian conquest of the Northern Kingdom in the 8th century BCE, the territory of the tribe of Dan was subjugated by the armies of Tiglath-Pileser III and later Sargon II. As a result, much of the population was deported, a common Assyrian practice to weaken local resistance, leading to the irreparable loss of many historical records about the tribe. Some survivors from Dan fled south, seeking refuge in the Kingdom of Judah. There, they were gradually assimilated into the Judahite population, blending into the national identity that would later solidify during the Babylonian exile. One of the most distinctive traits of the tribe of Dan was their tradition of maritime navigation. This skill is subtly referenced in the Song of Deborah, Judges 5, which laments that Dan lingered by his ships while other tribes engaged in battle. This reference suggests that Dan had a strong connection to maritime activities and commerce, likely influenced by their original proximity to the coast and contact with seafaring peoples like the Philistines and Phoenicians. Interestingly, the maritime tradition associated with Dan may not have been originally theirs, but rather absorbed through intense interaction with the Philistines, experienced navigators and one of the mysterious sea peoples, and the Phoenicians, uncontested masters of navigation and commerce in the Mediterranean. In the realm of symbolic representation, modern artists often associate Dan with the image of the scales of justice. This choice is based on the meaning of the name Dan, which can be translated as justice, judgment, or verdict, as reflected in Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49:16. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. However, in more traditional depictions, the symbol associated with Dan is far darker, a serpent or viper. This imagery harkens back to Genesis 49:17, where Jacob describes Dan as a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. This metaphor reinforces the enigmatic and ambiguous character of the tribe, caught between justice and betrayal, leadership and hidden danger. Some scholars suggest that the exclusion of the tribe of Dan from the list of the sealed tribes in the Book of Revelation may be related to their loss of identity, resulting from forced migration, Assyrian exile, and gradual assimilation into other peoples of the ancient Near East. This absence remains one of the great mysteries surrounding Dan's lineage. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you know about Dan, son of Jacob, and the tribe of Israel? Leave your opinion or any curiosities you know in the comments, and feel free to suggest which other tribes or biblical characters you would like to see featured in an upcoming video. Your participation is essential for us to continue exploring together the hidden treasures of Scripture. May God bless you abundantly, and see you soon.